They moved into my house like they owned it. And maybe in their minds they did. But I was the one who paid the mortgage every month, logged into the county website to settle the property tax, called the plumber when the water heater coughed its last breath. It was my name on the deed. Mine. Claire Ellison. Still, that didn't stop my mother from rearranging the living room like it was her own dollhouse, or my father from turning the sunroom into his personal smoking den, though he claimed he quit years ago. The truth is, it started small. After Grandma Iris passed in the spring of 2020, the house came to me. A clean inheritance. No conditions, no disputes. Just a folded letter from her attorney and a brass key in a velvet pouch. She left me everything, including her favorite rocking chair and that old recipe box with index cards in fading cursive. I moved in just after the funeral. Alone. The silence felt holy at first. I would walk barefoot on the cool wood floors, sip coffee by the bay window where Iris once fed birds, and breathe in the scent of magnolia blossoms through the cracked kitchen window. But then came COVID. It started with a phone call from my mother, her voice breathy and panicked. "Your father's coughing, Claire. They say it could be serious." They were in a small apartment near Charlotte. My father hadn't worked since the factory shut down, and my mother didn't drive. "Just for a few weeks," she said. "Until we're sure it's safe." Weeks turned to months. And now, almost 3 years later, they were still here, filling every hallway, every corner, every quiet moment I used to claim as mine. My curtains, the soft gray ones I chose from a boutique in town, were replaced with rose-printed florals because the sunlight's too harsh, dear. My minimalist kitchen became cluttered with cast iron skillets and loud ceramic salt shakers. My old family photos vanished, those silly Polaroids with my college friends, that photo of me graduating with Iris in her sunglasses by my side. In their place, black and white prints of my parents' wedding day, photos of my father in uniform, and a framed poem about daughters being blessings we borrow. Borrowed. That word stung. One Sunday afternoon, I came home from a showing and stopped dead in the entryway. There in the corner by the front window, my favorite reading spot, the place where sunlight pooled like warm honey, was my father's leather recliner. The same one that made that hissing noise every time he leaned back. He sat in it, newspaper, spread, his glasses resting low on his nose. "Don't block the light," he said without looking up. "No, hello. No, how was your day?" Just that. In the kitchen, my mother was stirring something that smelled like cloves and resentment. She hummed softly the way she always did when pretending everything was fine. "Dinner in 10, she called. And "Claire, would you mind setting the table, sweetheart, sweetheart?" That word always felt like a leash. At dinner, they talked over me. About weather. About the neighbors. About how the pantry needed reorganizing because some people didn't know where the oatmeal went. I sat at the end of the table, technically the head, but I might as well have been furniture. My mother served pork chops with rosemary and that same forced smile. She turned to my father. "Howard, don't you think the bathroom could use a fresh look? Maybe something Tuscan ochre walls, with those rustic bronze fixtures." He nodded, chewing. "That old tub's seen better days." Then she looked at me, expectant. "I mean, if you're okay with it, Claire." "Of course. It's your house." But the pause before "you're" stretched like a rubber band. I swallowed the rest of my sweet tea and said nothing. Later that night, I found myself in the upstairs hallway staring at the linen closet. It used to hold my quilts and extra towels. Now it was overflowing with my mother's labeled bins, holiday wreaths, heirloom napkins, and at least 3 scented candles per shelf. I closed the door softly. Grandma once told me, "Some things feel like love until they start to suffocate you." She said it while pruning the magnolia tree in the front yard, hands dirty, eyes sharp. She'd cut branches clean. "Never let them tangle too long. Let things grow, Claire," she'd say. "But don't let them choke each other." I didn't know what suffocation felt like until lately. It wasn't loud. It was slow. Like fog creeping in until you forget what sunlight felt like. That night I sat at my desk in the small room I still called my office. It barely fit a desk now since my father moved his filing cabinet in to keep things organized. On my desktop was a folder. Quiet planning. I hadn't opened it in months. It started as a joke between me and Iris back when she was still alive. She once said, "If you ever want to disappear, do it quietly. Plan like you're baking bread, not burning bridges." The folder held PDFs about refinancing, local rental listings, notes from a lawyer I once called about property rights, and one unsent email draft addressed to my parents. Subject line: time to talk. I hovered my mouse over it, then clicked away. Instead, I scrolled social media mindlessly. Weddings ads, reels of women making sourdough. Then a ping. Email alert. Subject: flight confirmation. Paris to travelers. June 2023. Round trip. I blinked. I hadn't booked anything. There was no note. No explanation. Just a line at the bottom paid via shared card ending in 0417. That card was linked to my account, my backup fund. The one I only used for emergencies. I froze. Downstairs, I heard my father's recliner squeak. Then my mother's laughter drifting through the floorboards. They were watching old episodes of some game show, probably Jeopardy. Guessing answers. Shouting at the screen. Like they hadn't just crossed a line I didn't even know I needed to draw. I walked downstairs. Quiet, steady. They didn't notice. My father sat in his chair, one leg crossed, remote, balanced on his thigh. My mother had a quilt half draped across her lap, her eyes glazed with rerun comfort. "Did one of you book a flight to Paris?" I asked. Neither turned their head. The audience on the television applauded. Then my mother blinked slowly, her eyes adjusting to me as if I'd stepped into a light they weren't ready for. "Oh, that," she said softly. "I meant to tell you." My father sighed, still not looking at me. "It's for our anniversary next year. 35 years. I swallowed. With my credit card, my mother raised her hands like she was calming a bird. "We used the joint one. You never use it. You said it was for family, didn't you?" I said it was for emergencies. My voice wasn't loud, but it was the clearest thing in the room. "Well," she replied, that smile curling again, "this might be the last time we get to go anywhere. Your father's knees aren't what they used to be." I looked at him. He didn't even flinch. After a moment, he said, "After all we've done for you, Claire, now you want to draw lines." That line sliced through me sharper than any yelling could have. Like I'd been standing on one side of a riverbank waiting for someone to build a bridge, only to realize they'd burned it behind me years ago. I didn't answer him. Not with words. I turned away, up the stairs again. Every step felt deliberate. Chosen. When I closed the office door behind me, I didn't hesitate. I opened the quiet planning folder, dragged it into view, and clicked on the file titled June Exit Options. I didn't know what exactly I'd do next, but I knew I wasn't staying still. Not anymore. Outside, the magnolia tree stood dark against the sky, bare for the season. But I knew better. Spring would come. I just wanted to ask about a leaking faucet. Simple. It had been dripping since Sunday, and I didn't have time to crawl under the sink before work. The kitchen was too warm. The kind of southern summer heat that made everything feel like it needed one more rinse. I'd kicked off my heels the moment I walked through the door, dropped my purse on the bench, and reached for a Diet Coke that had gone flat overnight. I took a sip anyway. It was Tuesday. Sticky, ordinary Tuesday. One of those days that slides into your calendar like it owns the week. I leaned against the counter and dialed Dad's number. It rang twice before he picked up. "What now?" he grunted. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light. "The kitchen faucet's still dripping. I think the seal's loose again. You think you could take a look sometime this week?" Silence on the other end. Then a sigh. Another clink, maybe the remote dropping, or his coffee mug shifting on the coaster. "I guess," he muttered. "Been meaning to anyway." "Thanks, Dad." I waited, expecting the usual grumble of acknowledgement, but nothing came. I glanced at my phone. Still connected. Call timer blinking. I was just about to hang up when I heard his voice again. "She's always calling about something," he said. The words didn't seem directed at me. They sounded off, muffled sideways, then louder. All she does is complain. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Another voice joined my mother's. I recognized that gentle syrup of hers anywhere. Oh, Howard. Be kind. She means well. Means well, Dad laughed low and cold. We let her keep the house, and she acts like she owns it. She does act like that, Mom said, almost playfully. Bless her heart. Like it was some grand inheritance, not just a roof over all our heads. My hand tightened around the edge of the counter. I wasn't supposed to be hearing this. But I didn't hang up. I couldn't. She's always been a burden, Dad added, and now acting like we owe her something. Oh, just keep reminding her it's her duty, Mom said sweetly. She wants to be the good daughter. Let her keep playing that part. I stared straight ahead, eyes unfocused, phone still pressed to my ear. The magnolia tree outside swayed slightly in the breeze, its shadow dragging across the window like fingers brushing past glass. I should have felt angry, but all I felt was flat, like the Diet Coke in my hand. I didn't move from the counter. Not right away. Their voices kept drifting in. I could hear the clink of dinner plates, the scrape of a chair leg over tile. They were in the kitchen, my kitchen, laughing, planning like I wasn't even a thought. She's soft, Dad said. She'll fold, she always does. And if she doesn't, Mom replied. We just smile. Make her feel guilty. Works every time. My thumb hovered over the screen. Still connected. I pulled the phone down slowly and tapped the red button. End call. But I didn't set it down. Instead, I opened the voice memos app. Titled a new file, Proof of Truth. M4 a pressed record. And then I hit redial. This time I didn't say a word, just listened. The phone lay flat on the counter, speaker turned down. I could still catch pieces, phrases that sank into me like glass under skin. Get a lawyer to look at the deed. Her name's the only one on it, but Iris always meant for this house to be family. She's just holding on to it because she's spiteful. You know Claire, she holds on too tight to everything. Always did. A silence followed. Not from the call, but inside me. It wasn't the kind of silence where you're numb. It was the kind of silence where things start to click into place. Like when you finally see what's been missing from a picture you've stared at too long. I picked up the phone and ended the second call. The recording had captured most of it. I hit save. I looked around the kitchen. The beige walls. The fake Tuscan backsplash my mother insisted on gluing up last fall. The spot on the counter where my grandmother used to let bread dough rise. I remembered kneeling on a stool beside her, hands coated in flour, her voice like gravel and molasses as she muttered. You don't give your name to just anything, baby. You keep what's yours, quiet like if you must. That memory rose up like steam from a pot left too long on the stove. I swallowed hard. Then I walked to the hallway. Stood under the framed photo they'd hung without asking my parents on their wedding day. It replaced a print I'd painted in college. A watercolor of grandmother Iris's magnolia. They'd put it in the attic. Didn't even bother to frame it properly. My hand hovered beneath the photo. I didn't touch it. I turned away and climbed the stairs. My bedroom door creaked the same way it always had. Inside, I sat on the edge of my bed, pulled out my laptop, and opened the folder I hadn't touched in over a year. Quiet planning. There it was. Everything I once thought I might need. PDFs of the deed. A scanned copy of Iris's will. Budget spreadsheets labeled Independence Track. Draft emails to lawyers. I had forgotten how thorough I'd been. Or maybe I hadn't forgotten. Maybe I just hadn't been ready to remember. Until now. That night I couldn't sleep. The ceiling fan spun above me in slow, unbothered circles. Outside, the magnolia tree rustled in the breeze, branches casting shadows across the window like fingers trying to reach in. I stared at the ceiling, my arms crossed over my chest, phone resting beside me, screen dark, but I could feel its weight. The recording. The proof. They'd said I was a burden. A burden. The girl who gave up her downtown apartment to help during the pandemic. The woman who paid every property tax bill with her name on the check. The daughter who never once made them feel unwanted until now, apparently. I got up quietly. No creaking floorboards this time. My feet knew every spot to avoid. In the kitchen, I opened the drawer next to the sink, the one that used to hold Grandma Iris's old receipts and notepads. Now it held my mother's coupon clippings and some Tuscan-themed napkin rings she got from Home Goods. I dug to the bottom and pulled out a small black notebook I'd tucked away months ago. Flipped it open. To do if I ever wake up. That was the title I'd scribbled at the top. I added a new bullet point. Keep copy of recording offsite. The list already had others: contact legal aid, pro bono, option, change utilities to online access, only. Look into title protection services, find storage for valuables. It felt cold doing all this at night in secret, but not wrong. I poured a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. The chair wobbled slightly. Dad had fixed it once with wood glue and refused to admit it didn't hold. That chair was like our family held together by someone else's insistence that it should work even when it clearly didn't. My hand brushed against the placemat, another floral one from Mom's Tuscan phase. I flipped it over. Underneath, the original cherry wood finish still shone. Bare, solid mine. The sound of footsteps made me look up. Not heavy enough to be Dad. Mom stood in the hallway wrapped in her satin robe, arms folded like she'd been standing there for longer than she should have. Her voice was soft. Practiced. I heard someone up. Thought maybe you couldn't sleep either. I nodded once. Just writing things down. She tilted her head, walking closer. You know, your father and I have been talking, she said. About what's best for the family. Long term. I waited. She touched the back of the chair across from me, didn't sit. You've had this house for a while now, we've all benefited. But maybe it's time to think of it more as shared space. I looked down at the notebook. Didn't close it. Didn't hide it, she noticed. Her lips pressed together, a flicker of worry behind the glossed-over patience. I know it's your name on the deed, she added, voice light, as if that was just a formality. But families share. That's what makes us strong, Claire. That's what your grandmother believed in. I smiled just enough to be polite. My grandmother also believed in locks, I said quietly. She changed hers twice in 1 year. Mom didn't reply. She backed away from the table, gave me that sad smile, the one she used to give when I didn't come home for Thanksgiving. Then she walked off. Not a word more. I sat there a moment longer. Just the hum of the fridge. The sound of something shifting upstairs. Then I reached for my phone again. Opened the recording. Renamed the file. They called me a burden, June 2023. 4A. I uploaded it to the cloud, and then I sent a blind copy to my personal Gmail. Subject: in case they try anything. As I shut the laptop, a single line from Iris's attic journal came back to me. The one I used to think was too harsh. You are not responsible for anyone's comfort but your own. It didn't feel harsh anymore. It felt like clarity. They posted croissants. Sunlit balconies. The Eiffel Tower glowing behind their heads like some divine stamp of approval. I watched each Instagram story with my thumb still. Not angry, just methodical. Because while they posed in silk scarves and captioned things like, "Finally enjoying life," I was doing the thing they never thought I would. Leaving. But not loudly, silently, legally. Clean. The day after their flight took off, I drove to a low-rise office complex near Biltmore Village. A place with tan brick, no receptionist, and a plaque on the door that read, Patricia Fields Estate Law. Patricia didn't smile much. Which I liked. She dealt in facts, not sympathy. She looked over the deed I placed in front of her. Original, unaltered. Signed by Iris in 2020. My name. Only. No lien complications, no co-owners. You have full legal authority to sell. I nodded. She continued flipping pages with clean fingernails. You'll want to file an owner affidavit before listing. Just to avoid any future contest. I can prepare that. Please do, I said. We went through everything: zoning compliance, HOA forms, disclosures. I signed. Quietly. No hesitation. That night, I emailed Marcus Lane. Marcus was one of the few people in my circle I still trusted. We'd gone to high school together. He was now a private real estate broker who specialized in discreet sales for divorces, estates, difficult transitions. His reply came fast. Subject: Dari off-market listing. Body: of course. I have someone in mind. They pay in cashier's check. They don't ask questions. I answered. That's what I need. Fast. Quiet. Clean. The house had never felt so still. No dad's recliner creaking. No mom's voice humming show tunes in the kitchen. Just the hum of the fridge and the sound of my own breath. I opened a fresh spreadsheet. 3 columns. Mine, theirs, unknown. In the mine column, Iris's quilt, my college diploma, the glass owl from the windowsill, my shoes, books, journals, the folder marked quiet planning, all of it got packed first, labeled in Sharpie. Room by room, drawer by drawer. In the theirs column, recliner mom's, Tuscan plates wedding, China dad's shaving mirror, her Ann Taylor scarves, his Vietnam Zippo. All wrapped, boxed, and delivered to a rented storage unit on the west side of town. Unknown items were harder. Old photo albums that weren't mine. A chipped ballerina figurine I barely remembered. Cookbooks with scribbles from both Iris and Marjorie. Those went to Goodwill, no fanfare. I didn't cry once. Not even when I unplugged the coffee pot Grandma used to use every morning at 6:30. It was work. And I had a deadline. Marcus called the following Thursday. I have a buyer, he said. Cash. They want to move quick. Do you still want to close by the end of the month? I looked around the living room. Bare walls. No clutter. The magnolia outside bloomed in full despite the heat. Yes, I said. Let's do it. The contract came through that afternoon. Straightforward. No contingencies. Marcus had even convinced them to handle all closing costs. I met him the next day in a quiet title office near Grove Arcade. Patricia was already waiting, wearing the same navy suit and expressionless grace. She handed me the pen. Sign here, she said. And I did. Blue ink. My full name. Once, then again on the affidavit. When the last document slid across the table, I paused just briefly. Long enough to exhale. Then I pressed the pen down one final time. Done. I didn't celebrate, didn't call anyone. Just walked 2 blocks to a little cafe Iris used to love, ordered her usual iced tea with lemon, no sugar, and sat by the window. Watching. Everything looked the same. But something had shifted. Over the next few days, I finished the rest. I changed my phone number, redirected all mail to a P.O. box, canceled every automated subscription tied to that address. Then I booked movers, not a big company, just a local duo who worked quietly, asked no questions. They came on a Sunday morning when the street was still asleep. By noon, the last box was loaded. All that remained was one final task. I printed a short note in size 14 font. Simple, no emotion. Your belongings are in storage. Unit 146. Code 2190. Lease paid through October. No signature. I folded it once. Slipped it into an envelope. On the front, I typed the name of their hotel in Paris. Care of the concierge. I drove it to the FedEx drop box myself, tucked between a Walgreens and a nail salon. Slid it in. Didn't look back. That night, I walked through the empty house barefoot. No furniture, no echo of footsteps. Just the soft creak of hardwood under heel. In the kitchen, the granite counter caught the moonlight. I pulled out one final sheet of paper, just one. It said surprise. A burden did this. I placed it right where the wine rack used to sit. No flourish, no tape. Just left it there. Then I walked to the front door, turned off the lights, and paused one last time in the threshold. I didn't whisper goodbye. I didn't apologize to the walls. I just shut the door. The next morning, I left the key in the lockbox and handed Marcus the code. He looked at me hesitant. Are you sure you don't want to keep a spare just in case they show up? I shook my head. Number. That chapter's closed. He nodded slowly. You know, most people, when they sell a home like this, especially one with family history, they cry. Or drink. I smiled faintly. I did all that already. Just not here. And not recently. I drove straight to the Blue Ridge overlook that Grandma Iris used to love. She once said the mountains out here reminded her that some things were bigger than family. Bigger than guilt. The air was sharp and clean, the kind that made your lungs ache in a good way. I sat on the hood of my car and opened my laptop. Logged in. Clicked on the folder I hadn't touched in over a year, Quiet Planning. Inside were PDFs. Scans. Notes Iris had handwritten before her stroke. One of them, dated 6 months before she passed, was a legal document she'd quietly drafted with Patricia. It stated clearly Claire Ellison inherits 100% ownership. No conditions. Another file held typed notes with titles like Emotional Labor Tally, Why They Stayed After COVID. Gaslight Patterns, Feb to June. She'd seen it all. And she left me a blueprint. That night, I stayed at a friend's guest house just outside of town. No television. Just a ceiling fan and the chirp of night bugs. I slept deeply. For the first time in months, maybe years. No pacing thoughts. No phantom footsteps outside my door. No guilt tap dancing behind my ribs. Just rest. They landed back from Paris 3 days later. I didn't see it firsthand, only heard about the scene from a neighbor down the block. Apparently there was a lot of shouting. My dad tried his old key. Didn't work. He rattled the handle, then banged on the door. No answer. Because it wasn't his anymore. My mother stood on the front step staring at the single sheet of paper I'd left on the counter. The neighbor said she turned pale. Like someone had reached into her chest and taken something that was never hers to begin with. I never responded to their texts. I didn't owe them that. Some exits, Iris once told me, are silent, but they echo the loudest. Mine echoed in every empty drawer, every stripped nail from the walls. In every picture frame they never noticed I'd replaced. In every locked door they couldn't open again. The plane touched down just after noon. The Asheville sun was blinding, too hot for September, too bright for jet-lagged eyes. Howard tugged his suitcase off the carousel, scowling. Marjorie clutched her neck pillow like a lifeline. She didn't even pick us up, she muttered. Howard didn't respond. The Uber driver dropped them off at the curb of Magnolia Lane. The grass was freshly trimmed. The hedges shaped sharp and clean, but something was off. There was no ceramic owl by the porch steps, no hummingbird feeder, no pair of Claire's navy flats by the door. And instead of the wooden Ellison home, established 2020 sign, the mailbox read, C. Whitmore Apartment 5B, Riverwalk. Howard pulled out his key, jabbed it into the lock. It didn't budge. He tried again, harder. What the Marjorie was already panicking. Is it stuck? Did someone? Oh, my God. Did someone break in? Howard rattled the knob violently. The door didn't move. Then he noticed it. A black realtor's lockbox hanging from the doorknob, blinking silently. Next to it, taped neatly, a sealed envelope with Mom and Dad written in Claire's handwriting. Marjorie gasped. Howard tore the envelope open with his thumb. Inside were 3 things. A folded printout with the address of a local storage unit. A small business card, Marcus Lane, Discreet Real Estate Solutions. A flash drive labeled in Claire's tidy script, You called me a burden. This is how burdens disappear. From across the street, Mrs. Holloway, their neighbor, waved cheerfully. Hello, Howard, big changes, huh? The new owners are moving in next week, lovely young couple from Charlotte. Howard blinked. Marjorie clutched his arm. What is she talking about? But her voice was fading, like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. Because just then she noticed the for sale sign tossed sideways in the recycling bin. The word sold was still visible, half buried under flattened Amazon boxes. Inside the lockbox there was no key. No note, begging for forgiveness. No, this was hard for me. Just the facts. Just the cold steel of consequences finally delivered. And somewhere not far away, Claire was watching. Not through a curtain. Not hiding behind a door. Through the Ring camera she'd never removed. Still online, still blinking. Still hers. Howard stood on the porch breathing through his nose like a bull. The paper in his hands crinkled as his fist tightened. Marjorie said nothing. She was staring at the flash drive like it might explode. "Do you think she's serious?" she whispered. Howard didn't answer. He marched back to the Uber driver, barked out a destination. 10 minutes later, they were in the back room of a FedEx print and ship using the store computer to load the file. Claire's voice came through before the video even started. "If you're watching this, you found the lockbox. Good." The image flickered Claire standing in the living room barefoot, wearing that soft gray sweater Marjorie had once tried to throw out. Her face was calm. Her voice even. "I'm not doing this to be cruel. But I've been quiet too long." She panned the camera slowly. The walls were bare. No family photos. No framed degrees. Just light clean paint and empty space. This house belonged to Grandma Iris. She left it to me. And I really believed that I could share it. That family meant making room. Claire walked through the kitchen, opened a drawer, empty. But instead I watched the walls fill with everyone but me. I watched my memories be overwritten. My space taken. My voice shrunk down to nothing. The shot moved to the bedroom. Her voice softened. "I used to apologize to the walls when I cried. When I felt selfish for wanting my own home. When I thought maybe I was broken for not being more generous." A pause. "But I'm not broken. I just forgot that love isn't the same as sacrifice." The camera settled on the fireplace. A folded slip of paper rested on the mantel. "I'm selling the house. It's mine. Legally. Morally. Sentimentally. Mine." Howard slammed his palm on the desk, startling the young clerk behind the counter. "She's bluffing," he growled. Marjorie didn't respond. Her eyes were glossy, fixed on the screen. Claire's voice continued softer now. "If you're angry, I understand. If you feel betrayed, I understand that too. I felt all those things for years. But understanding isn't the same as agreeing. Or staying." Marjorie reached for the keyboard with trembling fingers, pausing the video. "Howard," she said, almost choking. "She's really gone." Howard's face was red, sweat gleaming at his hairline. His jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. "She left us with nothing," he spat. Marjorie looked at him. "No," she said quietly. "She left us exactly what we gave her." In that moment, the clerk behind the counter offered them a USB to phone adapter. Howard waved him off. They walked out of the store in silence. Back at the house, the Ring camera light blinked again. Claire sat in her car miles away, watching it from her phone. She saw Howard try the door again. Saw Marjorie collapse onto the porch steps, her face in her hands. Claire didn't flinch. She turned off the app. Not with anger. Not with triumph, just peace. For the first time in years, the silence didn't sting. It didn't beg to be filled. It simply was. Claire hadn't planned to drive by the house. She had sworn she wouldn't. But habits were hard to unlearn, especially the quiet ones. The late summer sun spilled long shadows over the road as she turned onto Magnolia Drive. The wheels slowed instinctively, but her hands didn't waver on the wheel. There it was. The house she used to tiptoe in after evening showings. The porch where Iris once braided her hair. The window seat, her window seat where her father's recliner had sat like a throne for 3 long years. Now the shutters were freshly painted. The porch had new planters filled with succulents. A different car was in the driveway. The mailbox bore a new name. She didn't recognize it, didn't need to. Claire didn't stop. She didn't slow down enough for anyone to catch her eye. And most important, she didn't look in the rear-view mirror. Because this time she wasn't leaving in shame. She wasn't running or doubting or aching. She was simply done. The silence inside her didn't echo anymore. It settled, like dust after a storm. Like the kind of peace that doesn't announce itself, just arrives quietly and stays. And when Claire turned onto the highway, the sun in her eyes didn't feel like a glare. It felt like beginning. They didn't ask how I was. They only asked why I didn't warn them. The first voicemail came at 7:12 a.m. The phone buzzed once on the windowsill beside my eucalyptus plant, the sound muffled by early sun and the hum of a quiet morning. I let it go to voicemail. Then came the second. And the third. By the time I finished my oatmeal and rinsed the spoon, there were 9 missed calls, 7 from Mom, 2 from Dad. I didn't open any of the messages. I didn't need to. I already knew the tone. The pacing. The wounded confusion. I walked barefoot across the new apartment floor, a space that still smelled faintly of paint and hope. The windows were open. The air moved the curtains gently, as if reminding me, this is yours now. No one had asked for my opinion on the tiles. No one had replaced my books with porcelain angels. No one had touched the corkboard titled My Space, My Say. Just after lunch, the first email arrived. Subject line, Claire, please. I clicked it. Only because I was ready. Only because for the first time, I didn't feel like I was about to be swallowed whole by their words. Claire, I don't know what to say. We came back to nothing. You left us no warning. No chance to explain. This was cruel. We're your parents. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. Mom, I stared at that line, no warning, longer than I meant to. They hadn't warned me when they moved in and never left. They hadn't warned me when they started replacing my things with theirs. They hadn't warned me when they planned to take my home while I was in it. The next email was from Dad. Short. Clipped. A bullet wound, not a conversation. So this is who you are now. You could have handled it better. We didn't raise you to be like this. I didn't reply, not right away. I made tea. Took a walk to the mailbox. Talked briefly with the woman in 4B about her cat's new cone collar. And when the sun began to soften against the rooftops, I sat down and typed, I was raised to endure. And I did, but enduring isn't living. That was it. I hit send and turned off the notifications. Lana came by that evening with 2 plastic champagne flutes and a tiny bottle of sparkling rosé. She didn't ask questions. Just lifted her glass. To space, she said, that no one else controls. We clinked. I felt it in my chest, something uncurled, something that had been clenched for too long. Later that night, I opened the box. The one Iris had left me. She gave it to me on my 25th birthday and said, not for now. For when the fog finally lifts, it was a small velvet box. Inside, a silver chess piece, a queen. Heavy, real, polished like a mirror. Tucked beneath it, a folded note in her unmistakable handwriting. Move when they think you've frozen. I didn't cry. I smiled. And for the first time in a very long time, I slept. The next morning, another voicemail came through. It was longer. More urgent. I didn't play it. I read the transcript. Claire, this is your father. I don't know what got into you, but you've really crossed a line. After everything we gave up for you, you think this is justice. You blindsided us. That house was our stability too. You should be ashamed. Ashamed. It used to be such a sharp word, one that could sink me in seconds. But now it rolled off like water on slate. By noon, the third email arrived. Longer this time. From Mom. Claire, we are heartbroken. We've done our best. Maybe not perfectly, but always with love. Families have bumps. You don't throw people away because of discomfort. You've rewritten the past, Claire. You're not being fair. And this isn't the daughter I know. I stared at that sentence. You've rewritten the past. It was laughable, really. They weren't angry because I erased the truth. They were angry because I refused to keep pretending their version was the truth. I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled out an old spiral notebook from my desk drawer. The one where I used to journal when I still lived under their roof. Hidden thoughts in cramped cursive. Half of them written with a penlight under my comforter at night. I flipped through pages until I found the line I was looking for. There will never be a right way to leave people who refuse to see you. I had written that on a Tuesday night 3 years ago, after my mother told me I was too sensitive when I said her words stung. I smiled at the ink. It had faded a little, but the truth in it hadn't. That evening, Lana stopped by again with Thai takeout and a small green candle in the shape of a succulent. "You still standing?" she asked, nudging off her sneakers. Standing, I nodded and still not explaining myself. "Good," she said. "Let them spin. You're not their narrator anymore." We sat on the floor eating curry and watching old nature documentaries on mute. For the first time in years, my shoulders didn't live up around my ears. Later, I slid open the small drawer in my nightstand and placed the silver chess queen beside my keys. Its weight felt like a secret. Not the kind that hides, but the kind that anchors. The mail came late that Friday. Thick envelopes, catalogs, a flyer for flu shots at the pharmacy, and one stiff white envelope with a blue seal and typed return address. Langston and Brightwell Attorneys at Law, Winston-Salem, NC. I didn't need to open it to know. But I did. Slowly, deliberately. Inside 3 pages. A formal letter citing a state law. Language so polite it nearly apologized for its own existence. Our clients, Mr. and Mrs. Howard Ellison, would like to open a discussion regarding the legality of the deed transfer and potential reconsideration of asset distribution. I sat back. Let it rest on my lap like a weight that didn't belong to me anymore. They weren't even grieving the loss of the home. They were strategizing, retaliating, trying to prove that love had strings and I had snipped them. I didn't cry, didn't rage. I simply got up, brewed a cup of tea, and walked to my desk. On the corkboard above it, where I'd pinned recipes and renters' insurance contacts and little affirmations from Iris, I found the pushpin shaped like a tiny silver star. I took it down, opened a new folder on my desktop, labeled it Countermove, Legal. Then I dragged in the scanned copy of Grandma Iris's will the deed transfer signed in 2020, the voice memo from June labeled Proof of Truth, and a screenshot of the Paris flight booking. I didn't know if I'd need it all. But I wasn't scrambling. I was preparing. Like Iris taught me. Move when they think you've frozen. And right now they thought I'd been cruel. They had no idea I'd only just begun to be free. They said I changed. The words came from my father's mouth, but the tone, the wound behind them was all my mother's. But I hadn't changed. I just stopped letting them tell the story. It was early December. Asheville wore the kind of cold that smelled like wet pine and courthouse steps. I wore navy slacks, a plain blouse, my hair tied back in a knot. No makeup. No earrings. No softening. The courthouse smelled like lemon floor polish and recycled anger. I followed the receptionist's directions to room 3C, mediation and family disputes. Funny. There was barely any family left in this dispute. My lawyer, Tamara Holt, was already waiting, organized, composed, and kind in that firm, unsentimental way I needed. "They're here," she said, glancing down the hallway. "I figured," I said. "Let's go." The room was quiet. The mediator, a man named Jerome, offered water bottles and a practiced smile. "This is not about blame," he said. "Just facts, process, and clarity." My parents were already seated. Mom wore her neutral face, lips pursed, cardigan pearl-buttoned. Dad had his arms crossed and eyes narrowed like he still thought this was a lecture I'd sit through. But I wasn't there to be taught. I was there to draw the final line. Jerome began. "Today, we're here to resolve a petition for contested inheritance. Mr. and Mrs. Ellison have expressed concern that the transfer of the home may have been executed without proper family consultation." I almost smiled. Family consultation. That's what they called 3 years of passive control and emotional rewriting. Tamara cleared her throat. "Let's begin with documentation." She handed over the copies. Iris's original will, the 2020 deed with my name solely listed, the notarized transfer, and proof of taxes and utilities paid exclusively from my account. Dad grunted. Mom sighed like someone had opened a window too wide. Then Tamara played the voice memo. Proof of truth. M4A. It was short. 1 minute 43 seconds. All she does is complain. We let her keep the house and she acts like she owns it. She's always been a burden. Just remind her it's her duty. She wants to be the good daughter. She'll fold. She always does. The room went still. The only sound afterward was the hum of the wall vent. Jerome clicked his pen shut. Based on the documentation and recording, this matter is clear. Ownership stands. There is no legal basis to proceed further. Case closed. No drama. No raised voices. Just paper, evidence, and finality. I stood nodded once to Jerome and walked out without looking back. The cold outside stung, but in a clean, bracing way. Not like guilt, not like grief. Just weather. They followed me out a few minutes later. Mom called my name once. Soft. Not angry. Just stunned. Dad didn't speak. He never did when he didn't have control. I didn't turn around. From the edge of my vision, I saw him shove his hands in his coat pockets like he could warm himself with all the silence he never used for love. I walked past them like I didn't recognize their shape. They looked at me like I was someone they'd known once in a dream before I started making choices they couldn't unmake. Back at my apartment, I changed into soft socks and pulled my hair loose. Made lentil soup. Lit a candle that smelled like bergamot and cedar. Normal things, small things. But they held. They didn't fall apart when I leaned on them. Later that evening, I pulled out a small wooden box from my dresser. It had been there since Iris passed. I'd never opened it. The lid creaked slightly. Inside, a velvet pouch and folded note in that sharp, slanted handwriting I used to try to mimic as a kid. I poured the pouch into my palm. A silver chess piece. The Queen. The note read, "Move when they think you've frozen." That was Iris. No long letter, no explanation. Just strategy. I pinned the note beside her photo on my corkboard, right next to a new one I'd started writing. What I own, my breath, my pace, my silence, my decisions, my name. And now finally my voice. The table only had 5 chairs, but that night only 3 were filled. Lana brought over takeout from the Thai place we both liked but never ordered from when we were still trying to please other people's palates. Her boyfriend came too tall, kind, quiet. He brought a 6-pack and washed every plate without being asked. There was no playlist, just forks clinking. Occasional laughter. A breeze coming in through the cracked kitchen window. And not once did I apologize for the draft. We ate on mismatched plates. I'd donated the old china. I no longer needed special occasion dishes to justify joy. There was a moment just before dessert when Lana looked around and said, "I like it here. It feels honest." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. After they left, I wiped the counter, turned off the lights, and stood in the middle of the living room barefoot. There was no inherited rug under my feet. No antique frame judging me from the wall. Just me. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. There, waiting in my inbox, was a message from my cousin Jess. Subject: thinking of making some changes. I hit reply. If you're ready to reclaim what they took from you, I'm here. And I have a good lawyer. Claire. I hit send. No second draft, no double check. Then I added one last line to my corkboard under Iris's note next to the Silver Queen. I lost a house, but I gained something that doesn't need a roof to stand tall. Myself. And this time I didn't whisper "I'm sorry" to any of the walls. Because none of them were borrowed, and none of them were watching. Just me. Still, standing. Some goodbyes don't come with slammed doors or raised voices. Sometimes they arrive in silence with a new key and no forwarding address. I learned that family isn't about who speaks the loudest, but who listens when you whisper. That setting a boundary isn't betrayal, it's love pointed inward. And in this life, we don't owe anyone the version of ourselves that hides just to keep the peace. If this story touched something in you, I'd be honored to hear your thoughts. You're not alone, and sometimes reclaiming yourself is the kindest thing you'll ever do.